Our attention to the cash sitting in your pension pots now.
That is because of a change to the inheritance tax rules. Here to help clear it up is Dan Whitworth from BBC Radio 4's Money Box. Dan, there's a lot going on. There's been a lot of headlines. There's been a lot of chat. There's been a lot of noise. Clear it up for us, please.
Yeah, so some big changes coming. And the date for your diary is April 2027. And that's going to be a big change when it comes to inheritance tax because...
It'll come round quicker than you think.
And it will. Less than 2 years away now. It might sound a long way away, but it's not. And basically, pension pots are going to be included as part of the inheritance tax rules. So if you have a pension pot at the moment, that's passed on to your beneficiaries tax-free. So it is not taxed. From April, again, that date for you, April 27, that is going to be changed. It's going to be taxed like normal inheritance tax rules. And essentially, at the moment, you are taxed. So if you die, and when you die, rather, your estate is taxed above a threshold of £325,000, which goes to any beneficiaries tax-free. Above that is taxed at 40%. So anything you pass on is taxed above 40%, or it's £500,000 if you're passing on a house.
We are talking about private pensions, aren't we?
Absolutely, yeah. This is not the state pension. Obviously just stops getting paid when you die. So this is private pension pots. You're quite right, Helen. And also, surveys suggest that around 1 in 5 over 65s are now trying to start to think how they can avoid that inheritance tax. Perfectly legitimate legal thing to do.
How many people is this affecting?
It's actually fewer than you think. I mean, inheritance tax is widely regarded as one of the most disliked taxes that there is. But in terms of the number of estates that pay it, because obviously the person dies, their estate is liable. So it's not the people the money goes to, it's the estate that is liable for inheritance tax. So as of the latest figures, so this is the tax year 2022 to 23, 31,500 estates paid inheritance tax. That's fewer than 1 in 20 estates. It's around 4 or 5%. But these changes, they're going to claw more people into paying inheritance tax. So an extra 10,500 estates will become liable to pay inheritance tax. And altogether, 38,500 estates will pay more taxes, more inheritance tax, because of these changes. Again, April 27, when private pension pots start to be taxed.
Optimistic question from me. What about gifting cash? What are the rules there?
Well, this is one of the ways you can minimise the amount that your inheritance tax has to pay on the estate. So the government allows you to give away a certain amount of money each year that doesn't count as part of these inheritance tax rules, and that's £3,000 to any individual, to any one person. And you can carry that over for 1 year at a time. So let's use Sam here as an example. For example, they had their full £3,000 allowance to use last year, then decided to give £2,000 as a gift to their daughter. Now that left them with £1,000 of their annual gifting allowance remaining. Now, this £1,000 is carried over to the next financial year, making this year's allowance £4,000, which they were then able to gift to their son without it being eligible for inheritance tax as part of the 7-year rule. Now, we'll come to more details on that 7-year rule in a moment. But remember, that £3,000 gift, that only carries over for 1 year at a time. You can't not do it for, say, 10 years and then all of a sudden give away £30,000. That's not how it works.
Why are you giving your son more?
Well, there's a good question.
It's a question for Sam, I think.
That's a good question. Also, some small gifts, by the way. You can give away small gifts up to £250 a year, but if you're giving that to one person, that does count as part of that £3,000. When it comes to things like weddings, they're not counted as part of these rules. So if your own child is getting married, you can give them £5,000. Again, that's not subject to inheritance tax. If it's your grandchild, £2,500, and if it's just anyone else, another loved one, family member, you can give them up to £1,000, again, which wouldn't be taxed at this 40% rate. You should try to record what you give, because the taxman never forgets, right? Now, it doesn't have to be like an Excel spreadsheet or details, but things like WhatsApp messages, emails, text messages, some kind of record, and the details you're looking at, what you gave, so how much you gave, who you gave it to, the value of that gift, and when you gave it. It's just handy to have that little bit of a record should the taxman come calling. Now, this 7-year rule I talked about is quite crucial. If you live for 7 years after giving any of this money, none of it is subject to inheritance tax. Okay. Obviously, there's quite a thing, so you have to sort of, think, right, well, am I going to live for... So after 7 years, any money you give is not subject to inheritance tax rules.
OK. We'll come back to that in just a second. Before we do, does it matter who you're gifting money to?
Yes, because in the first instance, if you die and all your money in the estate, as it were, goes to your spouse or civil partner, none of that is subject to inheritance tax. Okay, so none at all. So, if, for example, if you're a son or a daughter...
relatively straightforward. Then.
Absolutely, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah. Then there's something called normal expenditure out of income, and this is things that people can give away, but it has to be part of your regular annual income. These can't be one-off payments from savings, and the kind of things we're talking about there are the following. So covering school or university fees for grandchildren, regular birthday or Christmas gifts, regular allowance to support a relative. Now that sounds quite formal. That could be just helping a son or a daughter with rent, for example. But again, remember, this has to come out of your normal expenditure, and also the ongoing care costs of a dependent relative. That, of course, can be quite an expense for a lot of families nowadays. And again, I can't say this too much. If you are gifting that way, for it not to be subject to inheritance tax, that has to be part of your normal expenditure. You cannot make these one-off payments that you dig into your savings or you dig into that sort of stuff. It have to be part of your normal annual income.
What if you do go over your allowance? If you end up gifting more than your allowance, how does the government take it back?
Right, so remember the point I made at the start, the inheritance tax is paid by the estate of the person who's died, not the people who get that money. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule. So if you've given away more than £325,000 in the 7 years before your death, or there isn't enough money to cover a tax bill, well, the person receiving it in that instance would be liable. But again, this is really important, this 7-year rule we talked about before. So if you give any money, and like I say, you die, well, 7 years after that, it's not subject to inheritance tax. But before then, it is. So if you give away money and you die within 3 years, so from 0 to 3 years, that will be taxed at the full rate. That's 40%. But after that, it tapers down.
As we can see here.
Absolutely, on the screen. So it tapers down and you pay less and less tax the longer it goes on. So, for example, between 3 and 7 years, we see that really tapering down, and it can be as little, I think by year 6, it's 8%. But again, that point, once you've given money away, you live for 7 years, none of it counts as inheritance tax. Lots more details on that, by the way, on the Morning Live website. I
was going to say, unfortunately, I'm going through this at the moment. It's really, really complex. Like, keeping documents and receipts are really important as well, gathering all the evidence you need. And every sort of case is very individual, isn't it? But lots of helpful stuff there from
You've
Dan.
raised so many points that people get in touch with us about. So we know there'll be lots of you who probably want to unpack that and just go over it in a bit more detail. As Dan mentioned, all the details are on our website, bbc.co.uk/Morning Live. Important conversations. Thank you, Dan. Now that we have got a few exciting updates from some of BBC